Okay.
Hello there. I think our traditional start is, hey, is this thing on? But I think today will be more formal.
Sure.
You can be formal. And today, as you can see, I have Allan Liska on the same camera, my temporary co-host for the mWISE live show, Seth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Seth Rosenblatt. I'm the cybersecurity editor for the Google Cloud blog.
And our guest today is quite amazing, especially the title. It's Allan Liska, the Ransomware Sommelier. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And I mean, I'm a big fan of yours and the podcast, so it's awesome to be on it.
So ransomware, some people say, is kind of a 2015 topic because that's when it was born, but it's also a very 2024 topic, as we know. So first, a very easy question, Allan. Just give us an overview of the current ransomware landscape. And also, why is it still with us? Why is this problem still with us?
You know, I talk to a lot of executives now who tell me they have ransomware fatigue. They're tired of hearing about ransomware. They're tired of the latest briefing on ransomware, and they don't want to hear any more about it. And honestly, since I've been talking about it since 2015, I don't want to talk about ransomware anymore either. The problem is, it is likely, next to business with no compromise, still the most profitable form of cybercrime, and that's why it sticks with us, because the bad guys make lots of money at it. Not all of them, but enough of them do that they're going to continue to carry out attacks, and our defenses haven't evolved the way they should.
So I have an embarrassing revelation about this. Somewhere around maybe 2015, I argued with somebody from a vendor. I think it was at Gartner at the time, and we were arguing what's more profitable, stealing credit cards or ransomware, long time ago. And I am probably very naive because I tried to argue that actually stealing credit cards is bad business. I ate a lot of crowds because of the statement, but it's interesting that it has the staying power. The business model has staying power. It's not just like a one-shot thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. I mean, and you know, the other aspect to this is ransomware is the only cybercrime. I mean, hell, it may be the only crime where it has its own PR arm, right? Where you have the bad guys on the other side bragging about all of their victims and so on, which again attracts more people to it. You don't see that in BEC. You don't see that in credit card crime. You know, the only other example I can think of is we have some small towns in the U.S. where somebody will knock over a gas station and then brag about it on their open Facebook page. But that's really the only time that we see people bragging about it. So it gets outsized attention, even though it also makes the bad guys a lot of money.
Can you talk about why that is? Like, why is it that the bad guys are so excited to talk about their ransomware successes?
It's built into the extortion model because the only way that they're going to get paid, if assuming that you have good backups and you can restore from backups, is that their hope that they can shame you into paying. And so they have to do that. But it also serves as a marketing tool for them because most ransomware operates as ransomware as a service, where you have the person that runs the ransomware and they rent out their infrastructure. And so when they brag about a lot of victims, they're able to attract more people to their ransomware as a service. And so basically it's two revenue streams, right? Because you have to pay to join the ransomware as a service and you have to pay when you're a victim. So again, it has double purposes for the bad guys.
And also there's a business model behind it, right? And you'd assume that every crime committed for profit would have sort of a business model, but it seems to be a lot more mature and robust. I'm thinking about sort of CMM maturity scale, but not for SecOps or security, but kind of for the business operation of criminals. Like it's also a very mature, well-polished business model, right? Can you talk more about this, the business side of it? Like if you can make
I prefer ecosystem to business, but effectively you're correct. I just don't want to give them the benefit of calling it a business because that's how the ransomware operators view it, right? I mean, we see this in their ransomware notes or in their discussion. They're like, "We're just a business. We're just doing pen testing," and it's like, "No, you're not, jackass." But yeah, there is a whole ecosystem built up around that. So when we talk about a ransomware attack, we talk about it as if it's a single event, but it's not. We will say Ransom Hub hit this victim, right? But first there was an initial access broker who got the access. And then that initial access broker sold that access to an affiliate that happened to work for Ransom Hub. And so then that's two threat actors. And then once the everything's encrypted and the data's stolen, then you're dealing with the operator of Ransom Hub who's handling the negotiation and taking the payments. And then Ransom Hub, the person behind Ransom Hub, is using the money that is paid to them to hire developers to improve their ransomware. So like we saw this with Play Ransomware, right? Play Ransomware started off as one of the freely available ransomware, and every time they got a ransom payment, they would pay developers to make enhancements to that, and they continue to improve over time. So it really is in effect a business model, but it's an ecosystem built up. And because it's multi-tiered, you have a whole bunch of people making money in different ways in support of ransomware.
Mm-hmm. So I think that it's still a good catch to sort of, by saying it's a business, we almost like agree with them and sort of normalize them without saying it's a criminal ecosystem that of course makes money.
Right.
I think that's fair. What about the aggressive tactics? Like you keep seeing it in the news because ransomware is one thing that kind of broke out of IT to sort of affecting normal people. We interviewed somebody on this podcast and his motivation for going into ransomware was it's the biggest cyber thing that affects people that are outside of IT in cyber. So, and we hear about those kind of aggressive tactics going after executive families and what I think even India brought up last time I spoke about this. Like, what can you shed some light on this? Like, what's going on there? Why doesn't the normal techniques of ransomware? Why does there still things that are scary?
So, as you said, you've been doing this since 2015, specifically with ransomware. I know you've been in the business a lot longer than that, but starting really in 2015, we did things like we really emphasized the importance not just of backups, but following the 3-2-1 rule, right? And so eventually, slowly, organizations started doing that. And so they were able to recover from backups more effectively. So now just encryption didn't work. So you needed the data dumps. But now there are so many victims. There's so much stolen data out there that like it doesn't impact the company's stock anymore to find out they got hit. Mostly got hit by ransomware. So now they have to do things like, okay, if we hit a school, we're going to email the parents and say, hey, we're going to release your kids' sensitive data. Or yes, we're going to try to deploy violence as a service tactics or DDoS tactics. So they're continually finding ways that they can put pressure on the victims and remind them that the ransomware actors have so much data that they've gotten from inside the networks that they have a lot of different tactics that they can follow. We saw this. You look at what happened with the ransomware attack that impacted all of the car dealerships in the U.S. Not all, but many of the car dealerships in the U.S. We saw that the ransomware hacker was talking about reaching out to the individual car dealerships and offering to take a ransom from them. Now, it wouldn't have mattered because that wasn't the problem. Like, they could have paid, the ransomware hacker wouldn't have actually had the capability to do that, which is one of the things that we have to keep in mind. The ransomware hackers also lie a lot.
Normal, right?
Right. So they're not afraid to reach out to victims of victims and promise them things they can't actually deliver if they think they're going to get paid.
Mm-hmm. That actually leads us, I think, to a really important question. What are the key factors to consider when an organization needs to decide whether or not to pay the ransom?
So, and I think we've been over this kind of over and over again. If it's always a security decision, the answer is never to pay the ransom, but it's not. It's a business decision. I think the more interesting side of this is the regulatory side.
You mean like banning the ransom? Is it the same as, or is there more to it than just like petitioning government to like make it illegal?
So I think that is possibly an option. There are some little problems with it. I've gone from being absolutely against it to like, because we can't seem to stop it. We're not improving our security enough to stop it. So maybe instead of the carrot, we do need the stick of no, it's illegal to pay ransom. Although I like what the UK is proposing for their law, which is essentially a ransomware license. So you get hit with ransomware, you report to the NCA that you got hit with ransomware, and then you have to pay a ransom. That gives the NCA a chance to come in and say, oh, hey, maybe we have a decryptor, maybe we have something that can help. But if you have to pay a ransom, they know that you're paying a ransom, who you're paying it to, and how much is being paid, which allows them to better track it. Now, I don't know if that law will pass, but I think it's a good sort of mid-tier solution or in-between solution between no ransom payments ever and pay all the ransoms you want. But one of the problems right now is we don't really have a good, solid reporting structure. Most victims of ransomware are not required to report it. Now, if they bring in somebody like Mandiant is going to report if a ransom is paid because Mandiant does things right, but not everybody does incident response correctly. And so most ransoms never get reported, and then we wind up with companies like wind up relying on companies like Chain Analysis who do an amazing job, but they're the ones that even governments get information from about how many ransoms were paid and who's getting paid, etc. There should be a centralized government database somewhere that everybody can refer to and go, but I don't need to know who the exact victims are. The government does. I don't need to know. But I need to know, hey, who's getting paid, what wallets are getting paid, etc., so that we all understand how big this is, how big ransomware is.
So a sunlight solution.
Yeah, 100%.
So how big have we estimated ransomware problem to be?
That's really hard, right? Because I think most of them not getting reported, we just don't know. But again, looking at Chain Analysis reporting, last year they reported 10,000 ransoms paid. I mean, that's a big number, and that's just the ransoms paid. And we think,
but some of them are maybe $1,000.
Right.
Wait a second, the 10,000 is a number.
10,000, and then the median, not the median, the mean. Which one is not the average? The median is not the average. Yeah, my data science days are a little behind me. The median payment that they saw was just over 200,000. So
that's a lot of money. Right. As like not an outlier, but as like normal.
Right, exactly. So 10,000 victims, median payment of $200,000, but also we think only about 25 or 30% of victims pay. So how many more victims beyond that 10,000 were there that we just don't know about?
And what's the record largest? Like you mentioned,
the 75 million.
75 million.
Yeah. In one payment. Yeah.
I mean, we should just like pause for a moment and like be freaked out about that. I don't want to go on a painful subject because I want to ask about cloud, but is it like a case? Some of those companies maybe aren't. There's no money for security, but there's some money for that. This is a very subject to that, but like, can you comment on something fun and interesting about this? Because I'm talking about one company in particular, and I will not name names here for this. Like it's a company that keeps saying we don't have money to do cyber right, and then suddenly there's 75 million. Like that's freaking me out a little bit. And is there like explanations?
So some of it may be coming from insurance. Certainly, and you and I have both seen this. After victims are hit with ransomware, suddenly the security budget opens wide, right? And it's like, well, where was this money before?
Exactly, where was it before?
Right, and so whether it's that you can suddenly come up with the money to pay ransom or wherever, you spend so much less and have an effective security program if you kind of put some thought into it and so on.
So how can organizations, I mean, it sounds to me like what we're talking about is a misalignment of incentives. That the incentives for doing the right thing are not aligned with what's actually going to cause the changes that we want to see. So how do we get organizations to change that up?
You know, it's really interesting. So one of the things that was supposed to do some of this was some of the SEC required reporting. So you had to start filing 10Ks and so on. But we saw already this year, the company behind the company that made the software used by the auto dealerships, they paid a big ransom. They didn't file anything with the SEC. And when a bunch of reporters reached out to them, they said, oh, this is no material impact. Right. And so the problem is lawyers. I'm sorry, any lawyers listening?
Wait, is this a signal to an attacker ask for more money? Like he's a ransomware operator. He ransoms me. He asks for 100K. I pay 100K. I don't report it. People say, why not? I said some material. So the guy says, okay, give me a I'm sorry. Like I know we're joking about it. It's your subject, but non-materiality is a signal to an attacker. Money to have them.
Right. So, and again, that's the problem with these huge ransom payments that we're saying. And we've seen, this is the first year that I can remember that we've seen 3 8-figure ransoms paid. And that signals to the ransomware groups and to people who may be thinking about doing ransomware, oh my God, like that's like giving money. I just need to get one of these victims. And that makes it harder. So the argument against banning ransom payments is, say a rural hospital gets hit, they have to pay a ransom because otherwise there's no other hospital within 50 miles and patients will die. But also, if you're a healthcare provider and you pay an 8-figure ransom, you've now put a target on the back of all of those small rural healthcare providers. So that's just as bad. So yeah, there needs to be some accountability when we do that. And I don't know how we write laws that lawyers can't get around, but we do need to. There needs to be some accountability for. Not for everybody. I have a lot of sympathy for a small business or, again, a small rural hospital that's forced to pay a ransom. I don't have it for a publicly traded company worth billions of dollars that can't implement basic security. Because we're not talking about new and innovative tactics for the most part. Occasionally we see something new and interesting. But for the most part, if you had, years ago, it would have been Cobalt Strike, Mimikatz, PowerShell scripts. It's still Cobalt Strike, Mimikatz, PowerShell scripts with some PSSF and living off the land and so on. So we're not necessarily talking about new and interesting techniques. We're just not able to detect those techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I've been trained to be careful with it on basic because they would have done it if it was basic to them in their realities, but also your point stands. Some of the stuff is very much the 1990s practices and 1990s tech.
Mm-hmm.
There's no extra cognitive to figure out what to do. They don't know what to do. Just doing it is hard.
Right. I mean, it's easy to stand here in a podcast and say, you need to detect Cobalt Strike better, but you do. And I understand.
You actually do.
Right. But I understand it's hard to do that. It's hard to implement. It's hard to implement that, but you still have to make that effort.
It veers into just fetch faster kind of like a conundrum when people say that and without any much thinking about how people will do it. But one environment, cloud in this case, this being a cloud security podcast, is sometimes mentioned as an environment where there's less ransomware, but in other cases, people kind of keep telling scary stories about, exposed MySQL servers with no password, encrypted attackers. So what is your take about cloud and ransomware? Are they friends? Enemies? Are they cloud an environment where there's less ransomware because of security, because of unrelated business? Give us the cloud ransomware take if possible.
So about 30% of the attacks that we see now are data theft only. So no encryption, they just steal data. Right. So they just steal data. That's up from about 10% just a couple of years ago. And the thing with the data theft attacks is it doesn't matter where they steal the data from. If your name is on it, you're the one that's going on the extortion site. My marketing team really hates this analogy, but part of what we've started to have to do in security is more data governance, right? That didn't used to be part of security, but now it's very much part of security. And the thing is, with data governance, you need to know not just where your data is and where your data in your cloud is, but where your partner's data is and where your partner's data in their cloud is. So it's like STDs, right? It's not just who you've slept with, but it's who all the
You really hate it.
They really, really hate that analogy, but it sticks in people's mind. So we have to be better about data governance to understand that and to understand where all of our data is. And too often in security, because we're isolated from the rest of the organization, we don't even know where all of our data is.
So does cloud help that?
It,
That's helpful. You know me.
I want to hear more specifically about that intersection of ransomware and cloud.
It does, as long as everybody in your cloud chain is following the right security procedures, and that includes no buckets being left open and so on. And so your idea of asset management and data management has to include what are your security requirements, not just for you and your cloud, but your vendors and their cloud. And how do you get that attestation in? Are surveys enough? Or do you need, I mean, I know that as a SaaS vendor, we at Recorded Future, we have some of our clients that want to pen test, not just us, but our vendors as well. And so you have to think about how you're going to check that and how often you're going to check that. And if you have a vendor that doesn't meet your requirements, what is your process for that?
And that also gets back to the classic question of who's responsible when it comes to the cloud. Because if the cloud is, is a partner in keeping you secure, and they're not telling you they have an insecure bucket or whatever.
Ransomware, cloud, and shipment triangle is really fun. I mean, fun in a bad way.
It's still cheaper than the $75 million tab for getting.
Probably, yes.
I mean, that'll buy a lot of Chateau Margaux.
Yes, and at the same time, we also buy a lot of cloud security. You're doing it. By the way, data governance is a very fine beast. A lot of really cool AI in our podcast tomorrow, AI security, very novel, modern stuff. When you start realizing, how do you actually, what is the main principle for actually improving security of that? And we're like, gosh, I don't. And then they're like, no, give me LLM firewall. And I'm like, here's the LLM firewall, but you also need data governance.
Mm-hmm.
It's sorry for the ransomware, but data governance.
Data governance is intrinsically, but data governance is now intrinsically tied to ransomware. I mean, it's so. Have you all ever worked in a SOC?
Sort of. I've not firsthand,
but you're familiar. So I got my start in the SOC, and the SOC quickly became the dumping ground for everything that had logs, whether or not there was security value for it, and often it still is. Mm-hmm. This is what we're starting to see with security. Too many times I talk to CISOs, and they're like, okay, now I'm not responsible for data governance. Also, I need to know what a RAN is doing, and I need to know...
And by the way, technical AI is in your plate too, dude.
Right. And now I need to know all the ransomware laws. I need to know, much like the SOC became the dumping ground for everything logs, anything even remotely security related now becomes the CISO's responsibility without more budget, without more capability. But it is things that you need to start thinking about, unfortunately, because you're the one who gets fired when something goes wrong.
So I'm going to check for audience questions very briefly. But we also have this question of one thing to do to sort of improve your position. I mean, not hopefully without spending 75 more. If you have a question of what's the single most important thing of advice you would give to organizations, look at the boss of your event, what would it be? And it kind of has to be one. If you want your industry, you want to, but it can't be like using these 137 things.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, you have to do the basics, because without the basics, everything else, and this goes to your point, like I can get the new latest AI whiz-bang thing from Black Hat or RSA. It doesn't help if I don't know what is my data. And that means that you have to have a triage of good asset management, good identity management, and good data management. if you've done those things, and they're not sexy, like they're not cool, nobody's going to invite you to do a keynote at Black Hat because you've managed to do that sort of trifecta really well. But you have to do that because anything you bolt over the bad data is going to leave you more vulnerable. So knowing what you have and what's talking to who, knowing who is in your network and what they should be doing, knowing where and how your data is being stored. If you can do those two things really well, then it's a lot harder for the ransomware actors to even get access to your network.
So on the who, what, where journey, what's the first step for organizations who haven't been doing it?
So, there are a couple of easy things that you can do, like that are very low cost. One, look at the kept list from CISA. I really like the kept list. It's not perfect, but here are the things that are being exploited now by the bad guys. Compare that against your tech stack. Then right there's your sort of like, hey, here's our patching regimen, right? Like let's prioritize patching these things. To your point, we can't patch all. There's going to be 50,000 CVs this year. You are not going to get to patch them all in a timely manner, but these 10 things you need to patch now. That's much more doable. Same thing. I love Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned. I know there are better services and everything out there, but he offers a free version for even small businesses. Hey, here are all the legal credentials that are in my network. Let's get those passwords changed. If you can do, and those things are relatively cheap to do it, but if you can do those two things, you're already taking out a lot of the initial access brokers. And that's a good start. And then build, knowing your full network scan, knowing what's running on all of your endpoints, enabling whitelists. Stop giving everybody local admin access to your network. Stop it! No!
Yeah, let's do it again. No local admin. No local admin.
But doing those kind of basics and building up from there, that goes a long way to keeping your network much safer.
By the way, a subtle point, I kind of picked on you a little bit the previous time you mentioned basics, but these are kind of the basic basics. These are not fake basics, like patch faster or get great as a mentoring that approach current every time. Like some of them are kind of like, I just had made up concept fake basics. Sound basics that are really hard, but these basics kind of like the legitimate basics. The non-local admin is in that bucket, and I think that other stuff is also in this type of inarguable basics. Like they really are basics. You're not doing them, kind of shame on you type of basics.
Right.
Compared to other things. Like if you can't patch faster, fine, but you can't patch 10 things. No, not fine.
Right.
Sorry guys, it's on you. So that actually makes sense. I love that there is value in this device for pretty much everything. By the way, the only audience question we're getting so far is, what did you do with Tim? And the answer to this is Tim is on a long vacation. He's on vacation.
Okay.
We can say Tim is on vacation, so he's having fun.
Yes.
He was having fun today. Long story. But the point is that
Tim is very convinced that you worry about him.
yes, but we'll let him know that the audience is worried about Tim. Tim's fine. And he'll do that. Great. Perfect. So we have like 2 minutes. So I want to ask you this possibly painful question that will get through very quickly. And it does not involve agents. The role of cyber insurance. I think that I'm getting some subtle disturbance in the force where some people kind of claim that cyber insurance, by making the payment much easier, by making people more willing to pay because somebody else's money. I don't know why this argument. I've heard people make this. So they're almost making it sound like cyber insurance is a problem. Like I am befuddled by that. I mean, I don't understand what you think about it. So can you straighten me up in this regard? Like I don't know. Like I thought cyber insurance was great, and then suddenly, that's a much easier way to fund their taxes. Wait a second. No.
So I think there's been a change in the cybersecurity industry over the last couple of years. There were a couple of headlines a few years back about how much money cybersecurity is losing for their companies, which I was very skeptical of. But when I talk to a lot of the bigger cybersecurity companies, the more established ones, they have really been focusing on reducing the payouts. Not some of them refuse to grant them at all. A lot more of them are doing that. But in general, reducing payouts because before they'll renew a policy, they're much more aggressive in testing the claims of the people that they're insuring. So it's not just enough to fill out a survey anymore. They actually, a lot of these insurance companies are old ones that are really moving to a 2.0 model, have pen testing, have all of these other arms that really test your network to make sure that your defenses are where they are, and they will not renew your policy if you're not. Now, there are some newer people who are getting cyber insurance that will insure anybody, and those certainly are going to be problematic. But
they will go out of business very quickly.
That's the hope, right? But the bigger and more responsible ones, and then when I talk to these insurance companies, they tell us they're seeing fewer victims in their portfolio, and they're seeing, when they do have a victim, the payout, what they have to pay to help the company recover, is a lot smaller because they've implemented these changes. And so I do think overall, cyber insurance is more of a force for good than it was a few years ago. It still has a lot of work to do, but if we can get more cyber insurance companies to take these kind of aggressive steps, then that forces organizations to improve their security internally.
So the real value for good is in forcing people to improve faster, not in generally manufacturing faster, but in making the victims, affected companies to improve faster. That really makes sense. And I think that reduces fears of falling in the head. So we have kind of no time left, so our closing questions. Well, I guess you give me a tip. So read materials on the topic, anything fun, reports, blogs, anything.
I really like, so there are two things. I really like the latest chain analysis report on payments. And then I always look DFIR report. Just if you want to see what the bad guys are doing, that's a great way to get a list of tools and everything that you can start detecting. So those are kind of mine too.
Perfect. Thank you very much for being on the show. This was amazing. We didn't help, but I think good advice to companies too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
I do want to leave the call.